Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kara Bloomberg, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Landrum HR, which is the parent company of HRQ. Many of you are clients of HRQ, but for those of you that are not as familiar, HRQ is a national professional services firm with an exclusive focus in the area of human capital strategy. Our consulting team brings a depth of experience in workforce planning and analytics, which you'll be privy to this afternoon. Our team also works with clients on talent management and talent strategy projects, org design, and HR transformation needs. In addition, we provide HR on-call services, virtual learning offerings, and in high demand right now, our methodology around rapid resource optimization. Finally, we provide interim HR talent, and we conduct HR searches nationwide, which means we have end-to-end capabilities with regard to your people needs. In 2019, HRQ joined forces with Landrum HR in order to provide end-to-end talent solutions for clients as one of our 4 divisions. Our other divisions include PEO services, worksite management and staffing solutions, and insurance. This is the second webinar in our 3-part series on leading through disruption. Our third webinar will be on May 21st with a focus on workforce planning for the future. You can register by clicking the link in our chat feature, and you can also learn more and register on our website at hrqinc.com. So to learn more about all of our services, please visit us, hrqinc.com and landrumhr.com. A few housekeeping items I want to point out before we get started. Please feel free to ask questions using the question pane in the control panel. We'll try to get to as many of those live questions as we can. We've also included a handout on the handout pane related to a rapid resource optimization that you can download. A recording of this webinar will be sent to everyone who registered, and a survey is going to pop up today as we wrap up the webinar, and we would love your feedback. I'd like to introduce our presenters for today, Jack Reynolds and Jean-Luc Moreau. Jack is a results-driven and highly accomplished global human resources executive and consultant with a broad portfolio of expertise in HR strategy and program development, talent management, compensation and benefits, organizational alignment and development, change management, business process design and improvement programs, and project management, human capital data and analytics, and employee engagement. He has led HR for fast growth companies and industries competing for talent with premier global tech giants, facilitated organizations through major business transformation efforts, guided startup new business ventures, and have navigated teams through numerous M&A transactions and post-merger integrations. Jean-Luc brings over 25 years of experience in workforce planning, organizational development, CRM, process improvement, and supply chain management with large and small public and private organizations, including Yamaha, the FDIC, the U.S. Postal Service, and Newmont Mining Corporation, to name a few. He focuses on systems, engaging stakeholders, and delivering results early and continuously to ensure momentum and results. So Jack, we've got a quick 30 minutes to deliver a lot of content. I know you're ready to get started. I'll send it over to you.
Hi, thanks, Kara. First of all, I'd just like to say my personal thanks to everybody on the call today, not just for joining the call, but I do understand from my own experience in leading HR functions what you've been dealing with and how you've been dealing with it. So greatly appreciated. I can't say that we've ever seen anything of this magnitude in this way, but certainly understand what you've been dealing with. And again, my hat's off to you for what you've been doing. Today, we're going to talk about organization design considerations and the importance of building resilience in organizations as we start to address this, quote, new normal. But, right, everybody's talking about the new normal and the world of work that's going to emerge from this global pandemic. It'll include agile workforce dynamics. We'll talk about critical resources, some simple rules for resilience, actually, which were developed by our consulting team and used in a lot of the work that we do with organizations. And we'll talk about some actions to consider for building resilience in your organization and workforce. Then we'll wrap up with some time for some questions. To talk about organization resilience, I want to take a minute before we get into the organization design piece specifically. So this is pervasive throughout what we'll talk about today. This is just a simple definition. There are a lot of ways that people may describe it, but this summarization captures the key concept. It's really more than disaster recovery or business continuity planning, which are obviously important. They typically address facilities and equipment, technology, maybe even access to contingent financial resources and such. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about a cultural capacity that includes a human element. Being resilient doesn't mean being capable of restoring everything to be exactly as they were before, but more about maintaining or restoring the ability to effectively deliver on your organization's mission. Resilience involves exercise of flexibility, creativity, and adaptability by people. So the business processes and systems, of course, are critically important. Resilience is also about engendering your culture, though, with the traits and capabilities of people in it, so that they can act with resilience. Understandably, organizations are really still deep in the throes of addressing the disruption of the pandemic, as we all know. But the time will come, and maybe is starting to come already for some, to reassess a lot of things, right? What have we learned? What can we think about differently? How are we going to prepare for this future, considering all these emergent behaviors and expectations and adaptations that will be necessary? So today's webinar, we hope will provide some meaningful food for thought as you and your team start to define your way forward. So I will go to Jean-Luc to talk about organization design.
Thank you, Jack. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all our participants. And thank you for being here. Key consideration for design, as Jack mentioned, we look at design in large sense. So not just organizational charts, but processes, policies, management practices, all those things that are part of a whole set to deliver an intended output with a particular experience. So having a vertical, flat, or matrix hierarchy, distributed or centralized management, top control or delegation, or reward individual contributors, or reward the teams, etc., and so many different dimensions, these are all choices. The events of the last 4 months has put us all on heightened awareness, and the sudden constraints imposed, the need for prompt decision has changed some of the path for making decisions. And the pressure has bent or broken the usual way of doing things. So we're in a special place where now is the space that is prime for making changes, because the conditions are fluid. The market is fluid, our thoughts are fluid, our expectations are fluid. So there's a window of opportunity for shaping or reshaping. And in that, there's opportunity for bold changes that we may have dreamt of, or creating new design, things like that. That's where we are in. So to conclude this slide, does the current design support what you want or need? I would say, what do you want your organization design to drive moving forward? You have choices. Even with constraints, we have choices. So I'll address now looking at driving you through a series of attributes that we have labeled as 7 simple rules regarding resilience. Those attributes address capabilities that build the organization fitness to respond, tackle, or look at disturbances and adapt to shocks. So the first one, foster diversity. Think for this one as diversity in points of views, or diversities in data points. It's really looking in a complex environment where we are right now, where cause and effect is usually understood in hindsight. Identifying patterns is key. And to be able to identify patterns, you need a diverse pool of sensors, a diverse pool of people that sense the environment and being able to bring you back information. So practically, what does that mean if you're thinking on an HR point of view? It's like, well, bring high potentials to key decision meetings within your environment and your executive leadership team. They can provide observation, provide an outsider view on what they see. It doesn't mean that they're going to be part of making the decision, but they inform that decision. They bring more variety on those pieces. At the same time, you can look at frontline employees. You can engage them also, being able to debrief them on what caught your attention today. What do you see as different today from last week? It's capturing data points, perceptions of people, and the more perceptions you get, the more valuable information you have. It's not one expert that can tell you this is what it is happening. No, in a complex environment, you need sensors, you need data points, you need your whole organization to bring you data. Now I'll move to the second point, which is ensure redundancy. Think there of having reliability where it is most needed. And I'll touch on that with the next slide when I talk about critical resources. The redundancy ensures that an organization has multiple ways of performing critical processes when a process fails for whatever cause it is. So there is a backup, and I'll touch on that with a critical resource. Next one is building modularity. Think plug and play, rerouting, reconfiguring. It's the capacity of an organization to reconfigure itself to adapt, removing the processes, changing how people are organized, things like this, really a flexibility. So from a practical point of view, can you swiftly reallocate key expertise, key roles you have in the organization where it is most needed? Or do you have to wrestle, for example, with what sometimes happens in organization ownership? This manager owns this resource, and I have to negotiate with this manager to be able to borrow this resource. And then there's the whole practical piece. And now we've lost 5 days, 6 days, a week to be able to do that. Is your organization allowing to swiftly reallocate? Some places, functions or structure that allows that in a way, some are agile times or self-directed teams, which operate within clear boundaries, but have a lot of flexibility to reconfigure themselves within that environment. Next point is pressure test and expand boundaries. Think here testing fitness. Picture a dog with a collar that you let go out in the morning, and every morning they go and check the invisible fence to see if it's on or off. This is basically, practically, what does it mean for an organization? Is like you have to understand what they call the envelope of performance of your process. So what is the range of performance of my process? What's the maximum throughput it can handle? And then passing that throughput, what happens? Am I losing performance in a small way incrementally, or am I driving catastrophic failure? So from a practical point of view, from an HR point of view, if you think a lot of organizations have let go of people, and when work is going to pick up, people will need to be recruited, onboarding, and other things happening. Well, what is the capacity of your HR department to do so? What is the point where it's not going to be able to support the need of the organization and hire enough people or process enough people just to be able to sustain the growth? So those are questions. And then based on that, what are the thresholds that you have to set yourself in so you understand I'm reaching close to capacity. Now it's the time to trigger this other process as a backup. Next one is understanding trade-offs. Think of trade-offs is like when you make a decision, there's always consequences, unintended and wanted consequences. It's you gain some, you lose some. This decision implies making a choice versus another one, and especially when you're looking at conflicting goals such as going faster, better, cheaper, safer, life balance, sustainability, things like this. Each decision can put us towards more risk or safety, towards disaster or lack of competitiveness. So within the COVID-19 environment, a high centralized management style may give you high control and most likely is beneficial to be able to respond quickly. But if you keep that control central piece too long, it may start to alienate, reduce accountability, creativity, and even create a decision bottleneck. So if the COVID-19 situation is in for a while and long, then you cannot stay in a high alert for 12 months. You need to upgrade the entire organization to the next level of management. So you can, the central command can releases its control and go back to operating in the new normal. Next one is strive for continuous flow. Think of just flow. And what does that mean from a practical point of view? It's like, think of HR processes. Does your hiring process really flow? And I mean, is it stops, start again, stop, starts again when you're hiring someone? Have you removed all the waste, as Lean qualifies it, out of that process so it really flows from start to finish? Or do you sometimes have to go back at the start to get some more data? And the last one is nurture relationships. Think of support networks. In dire times, relationships are the competitive advantage that enable faster recovering, opening access to support, skills, resources, and infrastructure. On a practical sense for an organization right now, what does it mean? It's ensure that each group within an organization maintains and nurture those relationships. Those are key. And it can be with the local community, your financial community, the supplier community. Cultivate the connections because there may be favors you need to have. You never know when you will need to pull on those networks to help you go over a hunch when bad things happen or challenges happen. So from I had touched about the redundancy, talking about critical resources. Now, what are critical resources? There's two parts around looking at critical resources. Like, first is defining who is a critical resource. And here I'm talking about people. You can be talking about that, about processes too. And then it's like defining process to ensure the redundancy. Critical resources. Being a VIP doesn't imply that that person is a critical resource. I have been in organization when asked where are the critical resources, people point to the org chart and shows all the managers and says these are our critical resources. Well, I think COVID-19 has shown a different light on who is an essential worker in the context of the community. The same thing is mirrored in organization. I've worked in organization where an administrative assistant who was gone on vacation and a lot of things stopped happening. And when that administrative assistant comes back, then things move again. So is that poor delegation? No, usually it's a poor redundancy. It's like that administrative assistant has a special knowledge of how actually things happen in the organization and when it's to take place. So how do you ensure that? A critical resource can be an executive, a welder, a negotiator, software engineer, any role that is present that, if not active in the organization, has the potential of halting its progress, its performance, or its growth. So looking at how do we increase reliability, we look at building, cross-training, succession planning, borrowing, or also managing adaptively. And managing adaptively means like you can separate the traditional manager role that manages deliverables and the people working under them. You could separate those two roles into a capacity manager and a value manager. The value manager drives the deliverables like a project manager does in consulting groups, and the capacity manager, like a practice leader in consulting groups, drives the development of the people and ensure that the organization has all the skills at the right level and really tuned to be able to place them where they are needed within the organization. And now I'll pass it to Jack to be able to talk about workforce resilience.
Thanks, Jean-Luc. So we talked about resilience at the start. So in that context, what I'd like to do is take a few minutes to cover some thoughts on where to begin, or what are some thought starters for how to look at building or enhancing resilience in the workforce. So first of all, I want to mention wellness. In this time, certainly we've seen just an amped up level of stress. And I think we all know the impact that can have on people's physical and mental wellness. Lots of organizations have certain programs in place. Be a good time to maybe revisit those, reinforce them, potentially augment them, because this is a critically important aspect of resilience, is people actually being able to function and things organizations can do to support that. Optimizing virtual infrastructure. So many new ways to work, and we're learning those faster than anybody probably thought we would. Lots of tools out there. Organizations are probably taking advantage of some of these already. Think things like Slack, Jira, Google G Suite, Microsoft Teams, even online training options. Think about also though, like hiring and onboarding processes. They might need enhancement or even end-to-end virtual capability with technology going forward. Incorporate stress testing. Jean-Luc mentioned the idea, and this is something, again, we apply this in a lot of the organization design work we do. But simply said, it's looking at potential scenarios or sources of disruption to the organization's operations. We look at a lot of different things, structure, process, workflows, and resources, but apply that even just to the HR function or department. And it really helps look at potential scenarios and what they might do to your organization. Building on that, think about utilization of the flexible workforce. Lots of options, lots of ways to flex and adapt to things. Maybe you're doing some of these already, but again, going forward, I think these will be increasingly important to think about. Hiring spikes, for instance. At some point, as we rebound, there are going to be needs to hire again. Don't know when, but they'll come. How are you going to address that? Use of contingent resources across the function, also an option. Contractors, interim professionals, outsourcing, PEOs is an option to support your whole function and allow you to focus on the critical things you need to do with your most critical resources. Again, these are all options to consider and build flexibility and resilience. Critical competencies, just a note, most organizations or many these days have some sort of a competency model or program. A lot of the ones that help with resilience are, quote, soft skills. They can be role modeled, even trained, and they'll help support a lot of this idea of resilience because this is how people interact with the organization and adapt and move through changes, et cetera. So this is key to look at as well. The sense of purpose, critically important. I think most people know this, the stickiness, if you will, with people in their organizations have a lot to do with that organization's purpose and their role in it. What's the purpose of their role in it? Finding ways to either formally or informally, communicate with people and articulate with them what that purpose is and what their purpose is and how it adds to that value. Extremely important thing to think about. Finally here, I'd say just the whole idea of revisiting the employer value proposition. So important at so many levels. And in the work that we do, we focus on helping define like two-way value proposition equation in this. But in this sense, right now, what I just want to say is there's so many learnings going on right now, so many new things we're seeing and doing and trying and testing, maybe things that we wouldn't be bold enough to do in, quote, normal times that we're doing right now. And these can be taken into account. So with that, I'd like to take a minute just on employer brand. Well, organization adjustments, we just talked about, it's not just about numbers, it's not about head count, it's not about reordering names and boxes on org charts. That's part of it, yes, but your overall value proposition is also expressed through your brand, and that resiliency with people and their connectedness with the organization comes through your brand. When I say brand, I'm talking about what it actually is and what the people would say it is, not just what you as an organization might say it is and put on paper. So think about that. Adjustments from the perspective of your employer brand should be seriously considered. And this is going to become increasingly important with respect to the changing ways of how and where work gets done, the emergent employee expectations, what employers provide. So many people have now found out in organizations that they can do work in different ways than maybe they thought that they could. Now there's expectations that come along with that. People can, quote, come back and say, well, we've proven this, so what are we going to do about it, right? A few things I want to just mention briefly, some recent surveys that are interesting around this. So a CBS News poll showed 44% of the people who had been, quote, sent home to work remotely are going to be comfortable coming back to a workplace outside the home. Only 44% said that. In March, SHRM surveyed 1,000 HR leaders. 95% of them said they expect the workforce to return to pre-crisis levels within 6 months. That was in March. In early May, another survey, this one done by Willis Towers Watson, 59% of employers in that one said they now expect work from home and flex work policies that have been implemented recently to extend beyond the pandemic. 63% of them said they reported positive impact on culture. So there's real learning and adjustments in the way people think about these things going on right now. A few points here just quickly. Brand impact assessment doesn't have to be a big formal process. Talking about checking in with people, survey, how they've received your actions during this time. Take note of how leaders have responded and how they've shown up. Check for that understanding around your purpose and their place in it. The basic needs, these are coming up big time. We think about all the higher level needs we usually address in organizations. The sheer safety aspect has become much more important. It's going to have to be addressed in our value props and brand going forward. The work environment, extremely important for HR to work closely with functions like facilities and legal and technology. They're going to have to be adaptations. It's not about foosball tables and free snacks. The table stakes now are going to be safety. Policies, so many are going to have to be redone. Your legal, employee relations, benefits. Shoring up in those areas is going to be extremely incredibly important. And flexibility just overall. Again, talk about table stakes. People are going to expect flexibility in how and even where we work is going to be a much more increased importance and expectations. And just overall engagement, that connectedness and the tools you put in place and the methods and processes to allow people to stay connected with these changes in the way we work are going to become more important. So before I turn it back to Kara, I'd just like to say again, thanks so much for what this community is doing. In many ways, like first responders, I think that's incredibly important. And just your organizations have to be so appreciative, and they're going to look to you for even more leadership going forward. Kara?
Jack, thanks so much. Thanks, Jean-Luc. I want to again mention we've got a quick few minutes here for a couple of questions that came in, but please hold on and take that survey and give us some feedback. So much great content here in just a short period of time, and want to be able to explore some of these topics further in future webinars. So Jack, I'll throw the first question to you. You mentioned resilience, and both you and Jean-Luc talked a lot about resilience. And can you give us some examples of key competencies related to resilience?
Sure. So again, lots of organizations have competency models, and they're important. Even if at the end of the day, so many of them end up looking similar across organizations, that idea of going through the exercise to develop them really builds the ownership and gives a roadmap for how you actually train and develop people in those. So some of the things that come to mind quickly are around just agility, adaptability, managing change, but also the more human element of connectedness with collaboration and fostering teamwork, some of those areas, Kara.
Yeah, great answer there. And I know a lot of companies are exploring how to add those competencies into their overall process when they're training and developing with employees. So Jean-Luc, this one is probably for you. What type of design change do you think would have a far-reaching impact for an organization? So looking for some examples there, Jean-Luc.
Far-reaching, I would say it depends on context. And when I'm thinking context, an organization that has been really squished and is struggling right now and more like in survival mode, it's like being like in a life raft in the ocean. And what would be the far-reaching design? For me, it would be make sure that you know your processes that you have in place can allow you to capture opportunities if they present themselves. When you're like in a life raft, you know where your flare is in case an airplane or some other vessels show up. The same for an organization. If you're really struggling, is like make sure you keep the open door for being able to capture opportunity. From the other side of the spectrum, an organization that is well placed, has some cash and all that, I would say looking at splitting the roles between the traditional standard manager and a value manager and a capacity manager. That's for me is a future for being able a lot of flexibility on reallocating resources within an organization to the place where they should be.
That's great. And I think a lot of companies now are looking at that balance between the resiliency, the knowing the flares, and the opportunity and the opportunity to innovate here during this time and to come out better and to look for new opportunities. So more to come on that, I'm sure, in future webinars for us. So Thanks, Jean-Luc and Jack, for sharing so much with us today in such a short time. A reminder that a recording of this webinar is going to be available and sent out to everyone that's registered. On behalf of Landrum HR, HRQ, and our presenters, thanks for joining us today.